Hello, everyone. Welcome to the midweek VarsityWA Podcast. I'm Todd Milles, your host. We are in the last few days of January, so we have a whole month after the holidays to look at the basketball landscape in Washington on the boys and girls side. And we'll have our special guests coming back on the boys side, Blake Conley, the former Union boys coach, to look at what he's seen over the past month, and Pete Smith, the former girls coach at Tahoma, to assess what he's noticed on the girls' side. And then we'll have our regular guest from the fall, Matt Evans from Evans Rankings, join us to talk about some of the teams that maybe are being slept on in Washington high school basketball. Stick around for a good show. Here we are, the first segment of the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. I'm Todd Milles, your host, and we're jumping right into girls basketball, heading into the final couple weeks of the regular season. And our girls basketball correspondent is Pete Smith, the former coach at Tahoma, a regular threat in the postseason when he was with the Bears. And he's been paying attention to some hot January storylines, and let's kind of leave the floor open to you, Pete. What's kind of caught your eye around the state with WIA girls basketball in any of the classifications?
Thanks again for having me. Always a pleasure being a part of this and getting to talk some girls hoop in the state of Washington. This is by far my favorite time of the year. We are nearing the end of league play. We've had a grueling November, December, and January, and we survived, and now we're at this stage in the season where we're positioning ourselves for seeding into our district tournaments, and then who's going to snag those seeds going into state, who's advancing, and who's going to go playing in some domes around the state. The things that have caught my eye around the state, just start with 4A. We talked last time just kind of about Davis. Is anybody going to catch them? And honestly, I haven't seen anything that's changed my opinion outside of just a few performances and surprise teams, honestly, like Chiawana being 17-0. I think that is that is something I didn't see coming, and they just continue to rack up the wins. Something that we did not talk about on our last episode is the East Side at all. And I think there's teams like Gonzaga Prep that out of the GSL that we need to take notice to. They are very well coached, they're sound, and they seem to be healthy and getting hot at the right time.
Let's go right into Chiawana. I mean, they're probably the surprise story, like you said, Pete. 17-0, graduated 2 D1 players from a year ago. Big, strong in the half court with Malia Rude and Kaya Foster. I think people expected maybe a little bit of a fallback or a little bit of a retooling period. And I know that sounds like this summer they kind of took their lumps. But let's talk about the Maldonado sisters. When you have a returning point guard who's feisty, who can score, who can see it, she's coming off a 20-point, 13-assist career high game against Kennewick. She's kind of really leading this new era of Chiawana basketball, which has been up-tempo, fueled by a lot of underclassmen, including her sister. Just when you have somebody that you expect to take a step back and hasn't in Chiawana's case, what are some of your thoughts about just what's going on in the Tri-Cities?
I think you started it off right. When you have a point guard that's returning, even when you lose D1 players, you still have your core. You still have your point guard, your leader on the court around. And when they are versed and tooled in what you expect and they go out and play to their abilities, you're always going to be able to compete. Now, 17-0, didn't see that coming. But at the same point in time, when you have a leader like her, you give yourself a chance to win each and every ball game. And that's what she's done. Like you said, 20 points, 13 assists. Obviously, she's going out and getting buckets when she needs to, but she's also sharing the ball. And when you have a point guard that can do both, that gives you a chance to win every game. Now, like you said, they also did lose 2 D1 athletes, and man, were they big losses for them. but that just allows everybody else to step up and get chances to play. I mean, honestly, I don't know what they had sitting on their bench because those kids didn't come off the court, and so now other kids are getting their chance and they're making the most of it. And so that's the best thing about high school hoops, in my opinion. It's not like nobody's around for four or more than 4 years, and so once your time's up, then it's time to retool and what do you have, and how do you develop those and get the most out of those kids. So yeah, no, I'm excited. They're a fun team to watch, and I can't wait to see what they do in the postseason.
Let's talk about Gonzaga Prep. It was the year after you had stepped down. It was the year that Camas won the 4A championship. I don't know how many people were picking Gonzaga Prep to make the championship game, but they had a ninth grader that kind of stormed Tacoma Dome, and Ayla Cornwall. She was off last year with a knee issue that never got right. She's back better than ever. They're real strong around the perimeter, with the Pedersen and Thompson, and I'm just wondering, Cornwall as a junior, Cornwall as a player, Cornwall as a leader, and again, this is another team that hasn't dropped a game yet. So Jeff Vardy over there is pushing all the right buttons, and it helps when you have your leader back. You're basically she was a little Terminator 2 years ago. I mean, you saw it, Pete. And
Yeah.
what are your impressions about how far can Gonzaga Prep go with a healthy Ayla Cornwall?
So I don't know if you remember this. So they played Camas at state, but the year before, Gonzaga Prep actually came over, beat Sumner in the opening round, and then we got to play them in the quarterfinals. And that was a rock fight. I think we ended up winning like 45-39 or something like that. Not our style of game or at all. But I think they just are very well coached and very well sound on the defensive end. We talked about defense last week. If you can get stops, especially this time of year, you're going to give yourself a chance to win any game. And as well coached as they are, and with the talent that they have, they're going to give themselves a chance to go make another run at it this year. So yeah, I just remember being, when we played them in the Dome, just being so impressed on how physical and well coached that they were. There was nothing on film that I was like, oh man, like this blows me away. But then you get on the court with them, and it's like, man, we can't run our stuff. They are just in passing lanes, and they are in a stance, and they just took everything away from us. So again, when you focus on getting stops on the defensive end, you give yourself a chance to win every ball game. And then as well coached they are, they're just so disciplined in their offensive sets. They find a way to get the ball inside, and when it's not there, they kick it out, and then they crash the glass. Just very well coached, very well sound.
Yeah, the gym at MLK Holiday had a couple marquee games. Pete Smith at Federal Way. The first game was Lake Washington. Davis coming over, playing in that MLK event in back-to-back years. A low-scoring game by Davis's standards, ended up pulling away from a Lake Washington team that had gotten down by double digits, but had a chance to win that game, to steal that game at the end. And then Bellevue and Sumner playing in the nightcap of that back-to-back, with Bellevue defeating Sumner. Again, another close game. Any observations about any of those teams, any of those state contenders that kind of stick with you as we head into the last couple of weeks of the regular season?
Let's start with the Lake Washington Davis game. That very well could be the championship game this year. Like I would not be surprised if we saw those two teams again, whether it's in the championship game or somewhere along the road. Jeff Wilson at Lake Washington is going to find a way to be in every single basketball game that he's in. We saw it. They went to the championship 3 straight years and played Garfield. And all 3 of those games, they had a chance to win those games at the end. And even at points and times in the fourth quarter, they were down by double digits, and they still found themselves down by 2 with the ball, giving themselves a chance. So with just how sound they are, they just don't beat themselves. They're going to give themselves a chance. Now, on the other side, Davis, low-scoring game. We keep talking about defensive stops. Who's going to stop them on that day Blake Washington got stops. Can they repeat that? Can they continue to get that many stops to give themselves a chance to score enough to stay in the game when the brights are the lightest and we get into the dome? So I think that's what kind of stood out to me the most out of that game. As far as the Bellevue Sumner game, what a fun matchup. I mean, two teams that kind of like to run, like to get after each other on the defensive end, and full court press. So like how fun is that to watch that level of basketball on MLK? Again, MLK is one of my favorite. You get out of your league play and you get to go play somebody different, and kind of prepare like a state game. And so it's just a good test and a good day of basketball for that. But as far as that game is concerned, I thought Sumner got out of sorts a little bit, a little one-on-one, and not so much running their sets and their style of play. Sumner is best when they are pressing teams, forcing turnovers, getting out in transition, and then playing inside out. And I thought that day they were a little one-on-one, and I thought that's why Bellevue got the best of them that day. Bellevue did their thing. That's who they are. They're going to get out. They're going to trap people, and they're going to force people to go one-on-one, and it gets you out of your system. And so it just played right into their hand that day.
Yeah, Saisha Simonton, who came off a pretty significant injury last year. Their starting point guard 2 years ago had a big game, kind of filling in for Robinson against the Spartans. Was really the catalyst for that win. Kaveh Borden led all scorers in that game. Probably the best player on the floor, but probably needed a little more consistent running mate for the Spartans to pull that game out.
That's also why you go schedule that game on MLK. It's that kind of, besides your league play, it's that kind of final true test of somebody outside of your district, hopefully outside of your district, that you may see down the road again, or it's a style of play that you may run into when you get to the dome. And so I always looked at it as that game is like, hey, win or lose, it's like that is a teaching tool that's going to help us down the road. I still remember we went and played Lake Stevens, and we got our butts kicked that day. But it was a blessing in disguise because we learned so much from that game, and it definitely helped us down the road.
Any teams kind of catch your eye that maybe not getting talked about? Lake Stevens beating Glacier Peak twice. Looks like they're kind of the team to beat in 4A Wesco. Tahoma continues to do what they're doing in the 4A MPSL by winning league games, although they did drop an MLK Day game to Woodinville. SPSL, obviously, Sumner kind of running away with it. But anybody else in that league, anybody else around the state that kind of caught your eye that maybe is not getting as much attention as they deserve?
Usually don't talk about B basketball, but if you haven't watched Cleellum play, they are a fun team to watch, and man, can they go out and get some buckets. So if you're ever in the Cleellum area, make sure you go check them out. They are putting up some points. They're fun to watch. But yeah, Tahoma, obviously my old stomping ground. They had a key injury to Riley Jaycox, which is a huge bummer. Such a great kid. Definitely bummed for them. But again, I believe going back to my time, they have a 6+ year league winning streak, which can't take lightly at all. Ben Simmons is doing a great job with that program. So excited to see where they go. So yeah, that's the MPSL. And then we were talking about Glacier Peak dropping a couple to Lake Stevens. It seems like they're kind of pressing all the right buttons right now. But I'm just never going to count out Glacier Peak. Again, coaching does matter. And they have one of the best there at Glacier Peak, and Brian Hill.
Yeah, for people wondering why we had a random 2B Cleellum Roslyn reference, it's a team it's kind of running the Tahoma offense. When Pete was there, Pete was contacted in the offseason. They wanted to get up and run a little more. They have a great point guard in Grace Giuliotto, and a really athletic team. Just came over and played Napavine, a 2B state contender. That 2B classification for small school basketball is going to be a real war of a classification at the state tournament. Those Cleellum Roslyn girls should be right in the middle of it, thanks to a nice little tip from our correspondent Pete. Yeah. So, Well, listen, I appreciate you joining the podcast, and we will see you in a couple of weeks to talk about um, district seeding and the playoffs, the exciting second season. Pete Smith, thanks for joining the podcast. We'll see you soon, my friend.
Yeah.
Welcome back to the second segment of the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. And now we're going to talk a little boys basketball with our analyst down south, former Union boys coach Blake Conley, who's had a good month to kind of study some of the really good matchups as we're heavy into league play, although we did have some good MLK games flash around the state, but kind of hit me. Let's just some of the things that you've been paying attention to that sort of caught your eye, maybe in 4A or 3A, or maybe even in 2A, Blake.
Yeah, so I think some of the MLK is always a really good time. I think as a coach, I remember never liking the MLK game because you always schedule tough opponents. It's right in the middle of league play, but there were some good ones. The Mount Si and Puyallup game, that was one that I really paid attention to. I think Puyallup. I think a lot of people had high expectations. I know the coach Olson does, and I think they've just been close. And once again, they were just right there until the end. The Mount Side just kept on kind of wore them down, and they're a tough guard. And so I think that was a good one at the ShowWare Center that I noticed. And then just some bigger league matchups have happened, and especially I think about the SPSL. They've have kind of they've run a little bit of a 3-team race and kind of looked like Bonnie Lake might pull away, but they just dropped one recently, so that's kind of Emerald Ridge looks like they have the upper hand in that league right now. But Emerald Ridge and Puyallup going to play again, and that game last time came down to the final seconds. So just kind of looking and seeing where the league play is going. And then just some big matchups, coming up because of that. Lake Washington. One coach told me if Lake Washington and Mount Si both take care of business, they're both the real deal, and they did last week, both with getting some good wins. And so I think that's a top 5 or 6 matchup that's coming up this week. So Richland continues to run things. I think I saw they're averaging 92 a game. So that's they're really putting up some points. And then Gonzaga Prep, as happens with them, they're starting to get some steam. Beat a really good Central Valley team last week it was, and so they're looking really good, getting some guys healthy with Groves, and he just looked like an absolute monster. So
let's start with Richland. It seems like they're scoring 100 points every game, Blake. We've talked about them before, Hornvet, Northrop, and Jackson Woodard's had a few 20-point games. I know scoring's not kind of his thing, but he seems to be a real efficient third scorer. It seems like they've played a little more. He was more playing point last year, but it looks like maybe they're a little more positionless. Everybody's kind of handling it, making decisions. How do you slow this offense down, and who do you think is best equipped to deal with these guys for 32 minutes?
Yeah, that's a great question. In terms of slowing them down, honestly, I think that's a tough question because the minute they just can score in such spurts, and if they punch you in the mouth right away, then you're down by 10 and you're trying to slow the game down or do whatever you try to do, which is not always the most smart thing to do. So I think for them, it's just keeping them out of transition as much as you can, trying to keep them in the half court, but they just play with such confidence, such flow. And, you just said positionless. And I would say a lot of their offenses, I know that, they'll do some different stuff, but Coach Strufer does such a good job of letting them play freely and have the confidence to shoot some, a lot of shots that are tough, but those kids can make it. He just has confidence in his kids. His kids have confidence, but they also have structure too. So I think that's a really fine line to find as a coach, and he's just done that for years and been able to do that. I just talked about it, but I think Gonzaga Prep, they're defending so well. And I saw an interview after the Central Valley game with Coach McIntyre, and Matty had said that his team's defense is their strength. He's really proud of their defense. They're buying into it, and that's the Gonzaga Prep way. And so I think if you look throughout the years, those battles that Richland and Gonzaga have had at districts and at the state tournament, Gonzaga Prep has gotten the better of them, and I think this is one of Richland's most talented teams. And so I'm really excited to see this. Obviously, Gonzaga doesn't have a Watson, but that system that system's made for the playoffs, and it's going to be just an unstoppable force meets an immovable object. I think when those two teams play, the differentiation of style and pace. And so I think that's the team that I think can really give them the most trouble. And then a team that can score with them. I think Lake Washington, they have a lot of guys that can score. Chihuahua gave them a game, and until the end. And I think West Valley, I think keep an eye on them too. I think those are some teams that I think. But Richland, I think is clearly. I'm not saying anything controversial. Is clearly the favorite right now. If you can try to keep them under 80, then you've done a good job. But you have to score 81 in order to get that. So.
Let's talk a little bit about what's going on in the 4A GSHL. Camas and Skyview have had 2 close games. Union, your former school, has played Camas pretty tough. What are you noticing about Camas and getting the transfer kid kind of acclimated into what Scott Thompson is doing? I know Ethan has a little bit of an ankle thing right now that they're trying to get through, but they're finding ways to win games, and they even beat Annie Wright over the weekend. And Annie Wright's played a lot of the 3A and 4A schools tough. Hasn't really got a signature win with this young group, but playing everybody tough. But what are you noticing down there in your neck of the woods, Blake?
Yeah, and I didn't realize I hadn't watched that game yet that Harris didn't play against Annie Wright. So the Camas team beat Annie Wright without Harris, and that's a good win for them, and probably might end up being a good thing for them. Those other guys just to kind of get some confidence in playing without Harris, and I think Camas they're shooting the ball really well. I think they've had a couple games where they haven't, but I asked Coach Scott Thompson and coach over there, and he said they're shooting 37%, and that's really good from the 3-point line. And so they're still kind of figuring stuff out. I think that when Harris asserts himself, gets to the rim, gets to the free throw line, they are so tough, along with spreading people out and forcing some turnovers. But I think they're still figuring out some defensive, what their identity is defensively. And I think they can own the paint. They got two kids over 6'7", but they got a lot of guys who kind of like to play on the perimeter, and just finding that mix of shots and kind of roles. I think they're still kind of getting into that, and with a new coach and a lot of new guys. Harris is really the only player that was there last year, but they're such a tough team, and they can score in spurts. And like I said, if they can find that defensive hold, but they've won close games. They won a close one against Union, and Union doesn't have the size, but they play really hard, and they're really scrappy, and they can they don't give up. They were down. I saw them down 19 against Camas, came back, and then but Camas pulled that off, and then they won their 2 really close games against Skyview. Harris hit 2 dagger 3-pointers against Skyview the second time, and then he hit the game-winning free throws the first time. So that's a great battle between Skyview and Camas, and I wouldn't like it, but they get to play a third time, so we'll get to see. But it looks, unless Camas drops a couple here, I think they're in a really good position to be the GSHL champions. But it'll be fun to watch Skyview and Camas for a third time here.
You mentioned Mount Si, and we talked about it on the podcast a month ago about the uncertain status of Lattimore Ford with the gruesome injury he suffered almost a year ago, and then transferring out of state. And he had some hurdles to clear. When lo and behold, Blake, he's back. Came back against Renton, came off the bench. A difference maker. If he's healthy and willing, he can be a huge piece to the puzzle for them. How do you see him? How do you see them reintroducing him after such a long layoff? He wasn't with them in the offseason. He wasn't with them in fall ball. He hadn't even been cleared yet, but now he's back. How do you think Jason Griffith will kind of reintroduce him to the lineup?
Yeah, I think that's his biggest question right now, because I think they were really starting to hit their stride. They got a really good win against Bellevue. Bellevue shot the lights out, but they just kept on coming. The Heidi brothers, I thought they seemed to be really kind of figuring it out and getting some boards, being tough down there. And then Hennig's such a tough guard. He can get to the rim. He's just smooth. So they're trying to find their stride, and they've kind of found it. And then all of a sudden you're introducing this, one of the best athletes in the state. So I think just kind of getting him, like slowly integrating him and not pushing too far. I mean, Mount Si's, whether they beat Lake Washington, they're going to be a great seed for the bio districts. They're in good shape. And I think for Jason, I think it's just going to be not trying to push it too much and trying to see where he fits in, and letting Lat try to see what this team that he's joining, what they're about and how he can help. because obviously he brings such a dynamic addition to that team and in transition and on the boards, and he can be such a big piece. But it's just finding out kind of where he fits with this group, while slowly bringing him along and not doing it too much, because I think sometimes when you introduce something, somebody new and different dynamic, all the strides you've made can kind of get lost a little bit. So it's for Jason, that's what his big hurdle is going to be. But obviously, you can't complain when a kid like that comes back.
One last thing in 4A, let's talk about the North Puget Sound League. We have co-leaders in the 4A and PSL, and Auburn is not, after the just the red hot start going into the new year, playing well in California. I had some close wins here against Kentwood, Kennedy. Tahoma has played them tough. And then Kentridge gets them at home to tie them atop the lead. Any concerns right now about Auburn? Did good teams just go through these natural lulls? Talk on some experience, but are you worried at all?
Yeah, so I had just mentioned to somebody, I said, Auburn, I kind of counted looking at their profile, and on one hand, they won 5 before that loss. They'd won 5 games under 5 points in league, and so they're learning how to win close games. They're closing, and that's a really good thing. But when you're playing with with the good team, NPSL is really good. When you're playing with those teams down to the stretch all the time, you're gonna probably drop one, and that's kind of what happened against Kentridge. But Kentridge is a good team, and they have a very similar profile to Auburn. Now, I don't think they have the flash, or they're not as scary to watch on film. Auburn will just turn you over so quick and get up and down, and just they get to the rim so much. But Kentridge is a good team, and they've run through the NPSL just as much as Auburn. They've split with each other. So yes, I think that Auburn kind of showed that they are beatable, and they've got some things to work on. And I'm sure Coach Hansen's kind of hopefully looked at that as a wake up call for just doing the little things along the way to not be in all these close games. But Kentridge is a good team, and I think Kentridge is kind of showed that they are at that level.
Let's talk a little bit about 3A. And Rainier Beach keeps winning at national events, keeps winning in Oregon. Keeps winning the Metro League, but had two games that came down to the wire with Eastside Catholic, O'Dea, 2 teams that know how to win WIA championships. Any observations about that trio of teams, and is there anybody else in 3A that maybe can challenge those 3A Metro League powers that you've noticed or you've been paying attention to?
Yeah, I think the more the benefit of Eastside Catholic and O'Dea, and I don't think Seattle Prep's at that level, but I've been impressed with Seattle Prep, and they've had some blowouts, but I think they're a team to kind of keep an eye on, whether it's maybe not Beaton Beach, but whether it's Eastside Catholic or O'Dea, but these teams play each other a lot, and I think it's just human nature as players and as coaches that if you win like Rainier Beach has, you may not be as urgent or have adjustments, where if you're Eastside Catholic or O'Dea, when you have been close for 3 quarters or close till the end of the game, like O'Dea was, I think making a couple adjustments or just having that a little bit more hunger the 3rd or 4th, or heck, 5th time that these teams play each other sometimes, that can be an advantage for them. So I think just like keeping an eye on the adjustments that Coach Kerr making, and that Coach Brandt is making it at Eastside Catholic, and it's just one of those things where I think it's just natural that if you beat somebody, you kind of just do the same thing, where these other teams will make some adjustments. So I think just keeping, obviously Rainier Beach's talent is superior, but I'm just curious on the adjustments and how that goes as those teams continue to see each other down the road.
Which on the spot, Coach Conley, is there a team in 4A or 3A? Or maybe even in 2A, maybe not getting as much attention, maybe flying under the radar that you've kind of noticed in the sort of the finer type of things that you've been really impressed with here the last month.
Yeah, so I think that a team, I'll start out with the 2A team, just to keep an eye on, just for playoffs, and that's Renton. I think that they play in the the Kinko. So they have been playing against one of the toughest leagues, the Metro, obviously, but then the Kinko might be second best league in the state. And so like for Renton to play all these 3A and 4A teams, and they're under 500, but once they start to get to the playoffs and play some of these 2A teams, I think they're going to be a force. I think their athleticism might be the most athletic, of kind of above the rim 2A team, along with Bremerton, obviously. But I think that they just provide something that not a lot of 2A teams have. So I think watch out for them making a deep run, especially with with the experience they've had of just playing in that really, really tough Kinko league against the good 3As and 4As. In terms of the 3A team that comes to mind, and I mean, I don't think there's a team that's going to be hanging with those Metro teams, but I do think Central Valley is from Spokane. I know they just dropped to Gonzaga Prep, and but they're a good team. I think they're going to come, the East Side. I could see them coming out of that area, and just Spokane just does well at the Dome. Those Spokane teams, they seem to, the toughness. I know they have, Axton I'm really impressed with him, and they have another kid who I really liked when I watched them against Gonzaga Prep. Walls, he was getting to the rim a ton against a really good defense. So Central Valley, I think, is a team to kind of watch out for. And then the team I just talked about with, it's you're not gonna surprise anybody with, they just beat Auburn, but I think Kent Ridge is a team to kind of look at the 4A that could make some noise. They've just been winning. They know how to win, and they have a player, Giovanni Moy, and he's a lefty, just super smooth. He's been an all league kid for a few years there, but he just gets into the lane, has a nice little 8-footer, can hit the three, clutch kid. He's just very smooth player, and I haven't seen anybody be able to stop him. So
you see why we have this guy on our podcast? The information and the observations just pour out of him, man. It's like opening a faucet. Blake Conley, former Union coach, our boys basketball correspondent. Appreciate you joining here in late January. We'll get caught up here right before the postseason and see maybe some of the seeding. We'll talk a little bit about that, but enjoy the home stretch of league play. We'll talk soon, my friend.
Thanks, Todd. Good basketball ahead, so looking forward to it.
And welcome back to the final segment of the VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. Joined by our regular guest, although he did miss last week. We went sort of a special interview guest route last week with some student athletes, but he's back after a 1-week hiatus. Matt Evans Rankings, the guy that knows more small bite data than anybody in the country about Washington high school basketball. Matt, or should I say Bobby Wagner, how you doing?
You know what? I'm still. I don't think I've slept a wink since that game last night. I'm feeling great.
Yeah, I'd imagine there was probably a little bit of overload, computer and humans, in the Evans household over the Seahawks NFC Championship win over the Los Angeles Rams. I know Matt Evans supports the home state teams, the Huskies and the Seahawks. And Bobby Wagner, though, why Bobby Wagner?
So this was actually a bachelor party gift from my groomsmen, and my jersey that I bought was an Earl Thomas jersey, and they're like, you need an action green, and they just figured 54 kind of looked good on my broad chest, so I was like, all right, I'm good with it.
Hey, one of the good guys in the Seahawks franchise, a surefire, going to be a Seahawks Ring of Honor, Hall of Fame, one of the best linebackers in the NFL for the last decade. So pretty good guy to sort of occupy the front. So, well, listen, the first, 3 weeks ago, we talked about, top 10 rankings and what computer said and what human Matt Evans says. A couple weeks ago, we had our all classification top 5 in both high school girls and boys basketball in Washington. And this week, we'll take a little bit of a different turn. Maybe a team in 4A, 3A, 2A, large school classifications on both the boys and girls side that maybe not getting the attention it deserves. It could be a team that's way back that's off the grid that you think is going to make state, or it could be a team that's ranked but ranked low, but you see as a semifinal team, and we'll do that large school and small school classifications on both sides. So let's go right to the 4A, 3A, 2A boys large school classification. What's one team that you're paying attention to that you liked what you've seen and you think is going to make a huge push and deserves maybe a little more attention?
I'm going to stick in the 4A for this one. The 4A classification is really interesting because on the boys side, you look and you've got such really, really prestigious teams like, you get your Camuses, your Richlands, your Mount Size, your, Glacier Peaks, Gonzaga Prep, all these teams that just have a bunch of hype. This team, though, that I'm going to talk about is not getting any of the love, and yet they are right there. And I think that they could make a deep run in the finals, and that's the West Valley Rams. Davis has kind of fallen off this year. They're not the same Davis we've seen over the last few years, and the Rams have really taken the mantle of the front runners in the Big Nine. And, while the Big Nine really hasn't given them too many tests this year, they've gone out, they've scheduled well. They're 13-2. They're probably going to be a 20-win team by the time we get to state. And I could see them, in a top 10 or top 8 ranking. I could see them possibly pulling a quote upset in regionals, and I could see them trophying again. I think that they're just well balanced. They've got some really good post players, and they're dynamic on the outside.
I'll go to the 3A ranks, Matt. And it's a team that's ranked. We have ranked pretty high, but not a lot of fanfare. Maybe it's because, Bobby Moorhead was in his first year coaching Bellarmine Prep last year. They did get to state. Mm-hmm. Even though they beat Rainier Beach in the regional round, that was one of the more where did that come from wins of last year. But they're not getting talked about a lot in the 3A PSL this year. We have them ranked in the top 5. They have height. They have defense. Cade Price has moved over to point guard. They took an early trip to Spokane. And I know that Bobby Moorhead, who played at Montana, he's a Stadium High School graduate in Tacoma, wanted a tough test early on because he didn't really know what his league was going to look like. And they played Mount Spokane and they lost to Gonzaga, and they played Gonzaga Prep and lost to both. So they started the season 0-2. And maybe people sort of said, oh, Bellarmine Prep 0-2. They have not lost since then, and they're coming off a really good road win at Bellevue. They've beaten some 4A SBSL teams. They already have a win against Lincoln of Tacoma, the traditional 3A PSL powerhouse, at Lincoln already. I really like the makeup of this team, especially when you're going to get in some physical battles with the Metro League teams. This team preaches defense first. And I really think is equipped to. I'm not saying they're going to go and beat all the Metro League teams, but I think they're best equipped to handle that style of play of a non-Metro League team.
I really like that pick. That was one that I was talking about. I was leaning towards as well. And you said that win over Bellevue. Bellevue's a team we've talked about who's got a lot of height too, and that was a huge statement win for me. They've got a big game against Annie Wright. I mean, obviously that one's probably happening as we're recording here, but that could be another game that really puts them up into the stratosphere.
Well, let's go to the small school classifications. The 1A, 2B, 1B boys classification. Is there a team that you feel like is playing really well right now that isn't getting a lot of fanfare?
The team, I'm sticking with the east side here, and the DeSales Irish. They do have 3 losses this month, but if you look at the losses that they've got a 10-point loss to Moses Lake Christian, who is a top 10 team, 7-point loss to Liberty Christian, who could be a top 3 team, and they've got a 2-point loss to Tulalip Heritage, who's arguably a top 10 team. They do have a big win at Touchy. Touchy's kind of an up and coming one. And they do have a really, really tough end of their schedule, playing at Liberty Christian this week, playing Sunnyside Christian, and playing Touchy. So it's going to be a tough end of the season. But I think that if they can play well against Liberty Christian and get 2, maybe 3 wins this week, I think that could be a big propellant for them into the postseason as they go through that really, really tough District 6 tournament where they're going to have to survive their league and they're going to have to survive crossovers with the Elmira Cooley Heartlands of the world.
I'm going to stick in the one. I'm going to stay in the 1B classification as well. And we're going to talk about District 1. And we all know what Lummi is. They inherited one of the big, maybe arguably the best big guy in the classification, Jerome Toby Jr. at point guard. But there's another team in that district that won on the road, has a couple big wins in Tulare Heritage. They played Lummi tough. The Parks kid is really good. They're fun style of basketball. But there's also kind of a maturity to this team, Matt, that I think, in that really strong District 1 with Nia Bay and Lummi, I think this is a team. If you told me in March in Spokane, hey, this is a team that's going to get to the state semifinals with an ACH or DeSales or Moses Lake Christian, Liberty Christian, which is what a story that's going on there at Liberty Christian. But if somebody were to tell me that, Tulare Heritage would get to the Final Four, I don't think it would surprise me. Maybe a little overshadowed in a really strong district with the other two schools I mentioned, but playing really good basketball. And I think a real danger to the teams that I think most people would consider 1B favorites. Well, let's jump to the girls' side, Matt Evans, the 4A, 3A, 2A. A team in any of those classifications that's caught your eye that just not getting a whole lot of love.
I'm kind of this team. I haven't heard a lot about them. They do have 6 losses on the season. They come from District 1, and I'm talking about the Snohomish girls. The Snohomish girls. The Westco is, 3A wise, it's not necessarily the strongest. They obviously they've got wins wins this month where the other team hasn't scored 10 points. But if you look at the losses that this team has, you're talking about a 1-point loss to a decent Arlington team, a 6-point loss to a top 5 Archbishop Murphy team. They played Lake Stevens tough. They played Issaquah tough. They played Woodinville tough, even though Woodinville kind of took it over at the end. I think that the Snohomish team, if excuse me, in the right matchups, I think that they could be a team that really surprises people. I'm not necessarily saying that they're going to make a semifinal run, but I think that they could be one of those teams, especially in this 3A girls, that we're kind of still trying to figure out everything from 3 to 15. This could be a team that maybe comes in as like a 9, 10, 11 seed and kind of surprises and makes it to Friday at state.
I agree. Ken Roberts is regarded as one of the best defensive coaches in Washington. A little disappointing last year. They had some injuries, and they had some injuries early this season that they've sort of overcome. You're right. They've hit a nice gear here in January. They're doing what many thought they would do last year in the 3A Westco, and they've clearly established themselves as the best team in 3A Westco. I actually think that they're a better team than a 9 and 10 seed, but I understand the losses might suppress that. But if the humans in the selection committee look at what Snohomish has done, especially over the last 2 months, I think they're going to be pleasantly surprised how good they are playing. I think right now I think we have them in the top 5 somewhere, and really like the way this team is playing in a classification that's wide open behind Bellevue. The team that I want to talk about is in your neck of the woods, not exactly in Kennewick, but those Chiawana Riverhawks, 17-0 as we tape this on early in the week. We talked about it. They were big and physical and really good last year with Kaya Foster and Malia Rude. And those two girls graduated and went off to NCAA Division I basketball, and you're just like, okay, who's next? Is it Kamiakin? Maybe Richland? No, it's the Chiawana Riverhawks, and for one primary reason, that's Bailey Maldonado. She is leading the league in almost every category. She's coming off a game against Kennewick where she had 13 assists to go along with 22 points. She and her sister are just lighting it up. I know maybe the league in general is a bit down, but Chiawana is not down. In a year that I think many people thought they would take a step back, I might have them underranked. It's hard to move teams up when the teams in front of you are winning or losing close games to really good teams. But it's going to be very, very interesting to see if Chiawana and Gonzaga Prep run the table and meet as undefeated teams in their bi-district or in their district championship game. Will the winner of that game be the number 2 seed behind Davis? Or will it be a Sumner and Union winner, maybe in District 3-4? It's going to be a fascinating postseason when it comes to seeding, because I know if you're a 4A hopeful, you want to get in that bracket opposite of Davis at Yakima. And right now, I think that's on Chiawana's mind. Well, let's go to the smaller school classifications, 1A, 2B, 1B girls. Matt Evans, lots to choose from. What team do you feel like's playing really well and nobody's noticing?
Well, for this trip, we're going to go up to North Central Washington here, and we're looking at the Waterville Mansfield girls basketball team. These guys, they've got some signature wins this year. They've got a win over ACH. They've got a win over a really good Cascade of Leavenworth team. They've got a win over Okanagan, not necessarily, and they've got a win over Pateros in their league. They have all of their losses. We're looking at 11 points to Nia Bay. We're looking at 7 points to a great Davenport team. Yeah, Brewster kind of took them to the woodshed, but Brewster's a legit 2B contender there. They've got some really this week is going to be the big key for these ladies, because they've got Republic coming in. Republic has been just one loss this season, and then they've got undefeated Yakima Tribal on Friday over at Moses Lake Christian. There's going to be some huge games for these guys, and I think that if they can win these, they're going to set themselves up to be a really, really good, dangerous position once regional seedings come out.
I'm going to go to the 1A ranks, Matt Evans. And listen, we've talked a lot about Royal boys basketball with Tim Revay coaching and Grant Wardenar. They had just a really crazy loss at home to state favorite Zilla. But I want to talk about the Royal girls. I really like this team in a classification that there's still, to me, there's a lot of uncertainty. There are teams that maybe aren't playing quite up to the level of last year. But I like this Royal girls team, and they have a Wardenar that's playing. She's a 9th grader. They have a transfer from Moses Lake, who's really added some length to their lineup. They're coming off a win against Wapato, one of the traditional 1A powers of the SCAC. I mean, do I think that Royal's going to go beat Zilla? Not right now, but I'll tell you something. This team's still growing together. They have some, there aren't too many 1A teams that have 2 5'11" scoring playmakers in the lineup, and right now Royal does. It'll be very interesting to see here over the next 3 or 4 weeks how this team sort of grows together. Maybe this is a team that gets hot in districts and does some damage, while their boys are trying to do the same thing. Obviously their boys are a little more high profile because they were in Yakima last year. But I think this Royal girls team is something. Is a team to watch here over the next few weeks. Well, that will do it for this week's VarsityWA Midweek Podcast. I'd like to thank our guests, Pete Smith, our girls basketball correspondent, the former coach at Tahoma, to talk about the girls landscape, and Blake Conley chiming in about some of his observations on what's going on in Washington high school boys basketball, the former Union coach, and then our friend in the Tri-Cities, Matt Evans. I'm Todd Milles, your host. We will be back next week as Washington High School basketball regular season winds down. This podcast is brought to you by Varsity Washington, your source for high school sports news, rankings, and more around the state of Washington. You can listen to new episodes of the VarsityWA Podcast weekly on YouTube, Spotify, or Apple Podcasts. And for more from VarsityWA, visit us at varsitywanews.com and subscribe for daily posts covering the high school sports landscape around the state. A special thank you to our guests on this episode and to Carl Johnson and Matt Bueller of the Portland-based band Edith and Axon for providing the music you hear at the beginning and end of this podcast each week. You can find the band on Instagram at Edith Axon Official. Thank you to our listeners for tuning in to the VarsityWA Podcast. For producer Lauren Smith, I'm your host, Todd Milles. We will be back next week.